Hey, Michael J.
What's shaking, man?
Dude. So, well, it's funny. It's almost like there's a tale of two timelines, almost two divergent sort of evolutions in digital. Historic is still reeling from the release of Amonkhet Remastered, which I don't remember. I don't remember Amonkhet having things like Wrath of God last time and Sphinx's Revelation. But
I feel like I had a Wrath of God from like one of those alternate art Amonkhets. I think I got one at a pre-release, actually.
Right. So definitely spicing it up, But over in I guess digital paper, in modern, there's been some evolutions in the post-ban world, and or just I guess the latest. We're definitely seeing a little bit of some of the cards banned in other formats really rising up. Believe it or not, Uro is good in this format. He hasn't been banned anywhere yet, but he's got a home here.
Go figure.
But some of the decks that have been emerging, I think, are kind of cool. Like I know that we've talked about some of these black discard decks a fair bit, and usually they look a little bit more like in the most recent league. There is a Nalamon 5-0'd with a more traditional smallpox deck, that's just basically all discard spells, Liliana of the Veil, a bunch of racks, call it a day, right? And, we've seen a lot of stuff like that, but there is a very different twist on the archetype in the modern prelim this week. So it's picture the same sort of smallpox deck they always play, but the twist is that instead of playing the rack, what if you just played with some one-drop creatures?
Well, here's the thing. I'm looking just to start off with Nalamon's 5-0 list. I like the rack for a couple of reasons. One, it's kind of hard to interact with, right? You got the rack, you got Shrieking Affliction, which is kind of the rack's number 5 through 8, or I don't know which one is 1 through 4 and which one's 5 through 8. But unless you have very specialized sort of interaction cards, a Smash to Smithereens or something, rack's just going to kill you, right? So it's an outstanding racer. It doesn't have any problems when you're playing cards like, when the opponent rather is playing like creature removal cards. I liked the spice of Nalamon's list with like one Nether Spirit. Obviously, Nether Spirit is sweet with some of the self-discard stuff. It's really sweet because it can never really fail because you only got one guy. And I think like just the non-interaction, or non-interaction is the wrong word, the inability of the opponent being interacted with you, I really like the rack and Shrieking Affliction and these kind of decks. And I got to say, I've actually never liked playing against these decks. It's always you're dancing on the razor's edge. A variety of matchups, right? Like you could be playing a beatdown deck, you could be playing a burn deck, you could be playing a combo deck. They actually take on all comers pretty well. And you could have like dismembers or fatal pushes, and you just discard them to Liliana, right? If your opponent's not playing creatures. Just cards like Smallpox, Inquisition, Raven's Crime, etc. are outstanding against combo and conditionally outstanding against control. And control's not just like everybody else. They're not great at interacting with Shrieking Affliction, unless they also have very specialized interaction cards. Something along the lines of an engineered explosive, something like that. If you don't have something like that, it's just going to kill you.
And there's so many different angles that people hit from in this format, too. It's hard for people to have some of the more specialized ones sometimes, some of the more narrow ones.
Yeah, I think that's one of the special features of Modern. And I know different folks are going to have very, very different outlooks on Modern as a format. I've actually always really liked Modern. I enjoy playing it. I think it's very skill testing. I think that you are very apt to play a great day of Magic and then lose to an unwinnable matchup in top 8. Like I think that happens more in Modern than in almost any other format. But one of the things that's great about this deck in the context of Modern is there's so many decks that if you just run into the wrong sideboard, like not even the wrong archetype, right, you just can't win. Like somebody, some joker is like 4 white Leyline, 4 core Firewalker, and then some other joker is like no sideboard cards for red, right? Like the texture of those two matchups is very, very different, right? And like you have a situation here, it's hard to sideboard against the strategy of the mono black discard deck. Like what cards do you play? Do you play like some kind of sand golem cards? Like, those cards aren't that wide in application, I think, in Modern. And at this, although I guess Lilianas are popular, or at the same time, like who's good against the card Smallpox? Like literally, the card Smallpox is very, very powerful. It's 2 mana. It's an incredibly powerful interaction at that stage of the game, and it lets you chew up stuff like an Urborg. Let's say you drew 2 Urborgs, right? It's like you didn't even lose any card advantage when you Smallpox yourself.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a strong play. So do you like the strategy right now in the format, though?
I could see for playing it. It's not typically my thing. I think that if I were going to play this strategy, I would have some pack rats, like maybe even just in the sideboard, because I think that that's an extremely powerful plan B. But I think that the 1 Nether Spirit's kind of cute in the main deck. It's almost just better to have 1 Nether Spirit than to have no creatures, right?
I think so. I mean, it's kind of a classic move, is the 1 Nether Spirit.
Yeah, I think like I kind of like the Rotting Regisaurs in the sideboard. I think at some point you got too many creatures, though. Like there's Plague Engineer in the sideboard and Murderous Rider, and I know those guys have text, but like a big strength of this deck is its fundamental non-interaction with other people's interactive cards, and you're getting away with playing cards like Smallpox with very little, kind of self downside. And the more creatures you play, the less value you're getting out of your own stuff. So I'm of 2 minds about that. But what's the list to contrast this? You said that there's a 1-drop version?
I'm looking at the wrong format, though. The one that was actually to contrast with this, instead of the Smallpox package, there's 2 different variations, both of them involving white. The a little bit more exotic version, in the Modern League, there's a dude, I don't even know what you call this. I guess it's Esper, but it's got the discard spells and black removal, but you're using but it's a Death Shadow deck, and then you're using white for Ranger, Captain of Eos, and then miscellaneous like Path Exile, and then you're using blue for Snapcaster Mage and Drown in the Lock. And then, so Carton is using a version of this, and man, I'm hoping you can help fill me in on exactly what's going on here. Like usually these Death Shadow decks we see red or green or both, right? So to see neither, and there's a lot of just unusual choices here. Tidehouse Scholar is a totally reasonable creature, but you don't always see it here, and it is an artifact creature, so I guess that's the next. It's got good types, and then like 1 Hex Parasite, that's kind of an interesting one-off target for Ranger Captain, right?
It is a target though, right? So I think that you it's a specialist. I kind of appreciate the ability to activate Tazagor on blue here. That's something. I think there's an Unearthed sub-theme here that's got some value with a lot of the different creatures in this deck.
I particularly like unearthing Ranger Captain of Eos, Snapcaster, Ranger Captain of Eos, and Unearth is a nice little package there.
Yeah, and then you've got Luris of the Dream Den, right? So
that's a great get with Unearth.
I think you can...
Particularly if you Thought Scour it.
I think you can do, you can do a bunch of a bunch of damage with Lurrus the Dream Den. So Lurrus the Dream Den, obviously not limited to just creatures. I think you can just go off with Mishra's Bauble. It's a pretty cool combo because Death Shadow decks, historically have, especially ones with like Taziger or stuff like that, historically wanted to play cards like Mishra's Bauble anyway. And, you just have this whole sub theme. You just kind of, instead of just going mono offense or, kill myself kind of offense, you could just grind them out with Mishra's Bauble, Lurrus, and who wants to lose to that?
So, no, nobody. If you just got a blind Thought Scour somebody, though, who are you hitting? Right, like normally you'd want to hit yourself for stuff like Lurrus and certainly Unearth and Snapcaster Mage, but we're also talking about a Drown in the Lock deck. Do you think the default is you just target yourself, but tactically you might Thought Scour your opponent to make your Drown bigger?
Oh, absolutely. Right, so I think you hit the nail on the head. You Thought Scour yourself on average. Like this deck's got Unearth, this deck's got Lurrus. This deck has Tassiger, Snapcaster Mage. There's lots of payoffs for doing it to yourself. But, there's all kinds of reasons that you might hit your opponent. Not just Drown in the Lock. Like, people used to do the Thought Scour when somebody was revealing a miracle. Right, because you got to reveal the miracle and then you draw the miracle.
Right.
So I think that there's all kinds of tactical reasons. I think there's probably some amount of tutoring that you can mess up with a Thought Scour, but I think that probably 8 times out of 10 minimum, you're hitting yourself.
So with no Planeswalkers in the main deck, is there a wasted opportunity? I mean, I see these 2 Teferi Time Ravelers in the sideboard. There's no way we want a little of this main deck, is there? Or maybe I'm just a sucker for Teferi, but the card just seems pretty good.
I think that this deck isn't getting that much of a payoff from Teferi, though, right? So it's already got 2 Inquisition, 4 Thoughtseize, 2 Tidehollow Scholar. So it's not having a real hard time resolving its stuff, I think.
Wait, resolving? No, I want to bounce their creature and then Thoughtseize it or whatever.
Oh.
You can bounce anything you want and then make them discard it, dude.
So you're looking at the same cards that I was looking at, Tidehollow Scholar, Inquisition, and Thoughtseize, and you've got a completely different idea with that. That is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Obviously, sometimes you're going to randomly shut off somebody's counterspell, I guess, but that's not the main thing here. I just think that it's a really efficient way to bounce something, and that solves a lot of different miscellaneous problems in a deck like this. When you can actually use when Teferi can be a reliable form of removal, but at the same time actually be a real difficult threat for some decks. Some people can't even do whatever combo they're doing, but to go further, it's got good types, man. And at the end of the day, what more do you really want?
I buy it. You know who I really want to bounce with my Teferi Time Raveler?
What's that?
Ranger Captain Vios.
Oh, yeah.
My own.
Yeah. Or Snapcaster Mage. With all these different types we've got, I can't help but wonder, what if we played green for Tarmogoyf? Is that weird?
I mean, that's the classic, right? But this deck is going in a different direction. Once you're green for Tarmogoyf, this deck's already got Mishra's Bauble, okay? You have got to be traversing the Uvenwald at that point. Right? This is a different universe. I think that...
Maybe. I just want to get Tarmogoyf back with Lurrus, man.
That's kind of hot.
Yeah,
Tarmogoyf is hard enough to deal with the first time.
Do we need blue? I mean, I would miss Thought Scour. But, Snapcaster's really good, but so's Tarmogoyf. And Drown in the Lock's fine. But
I don't know. Would you really miss Thought Scour? If Thought Scour just becomes Traverse the Uvenwald, Tassiger's the same, right? You just have green activation instead of blue activation.
I would miss Thought Scour still, yeah. But, I wouldn't miss it that much.
I mean, you'd miss Teferi. We just been talking about Teferi.
I know we have, but I still would rather Tarmogoyf. That guy... slaps.
Minimum. I don't know. I think this deck is probably pretty interesting as it is. I think Tidehollow Scholar is.
I think it's super interesting as it is.
That card seems like a little low power for this deck, right? So it's a good card, but I think you typically see Tidehollow Scholar in decks that don't have blue, right?
Yes, or decks that have some sort of other synergy, like can take advantage of it being a zombie, or if you could sacrifice or bounce the Sculler at instant speed with the trigger on the stack, so the card's just gone.
Yeah, if
This
you
deck
could do
doesn't
that
really have any.
and then like keep buying it back with Luris, that'd be pretty cool. But this deck doesn't, like you said, I think
I mean, you
have
could
like
pass your guy, I guess, but that's not like you're. It's not like you're even doing anything.
I mean, this deck is one swamp, one island, one plains. You can't get a lot of mileage out of that, I don't think.
No. So, I think this deck's sweet from a disruption standpoint, though, right?
Yeah.
I don't know though. Do you? I guess. I mean, maybe Drown in the Lock is just like the sleeper card of the year last year.
I mean, it's priced right in terms of its ability to, I think, just get an outsized amount of value.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to have something on the cheap,
like it's just everything to everyone as long as you get it in right when you can get it in. Right? I don't know if that sentence even makes sense. I think most people can understand what I'm trying to get at with this. Like, it's really like it gets them a lot, you know. And I do think that is a feature of this deck.
Okay. The other sort of approach to these black decks that I was looking at was a different Unearthed deck. I think Ryan Wu 5-0'd with it in that same league. We see some of the similar cards, Tide Hollow Scholar, Thoughtseize, Inquisition, Unearth, Fatal Push, Path, etc. But it's a Stoneforge Mystic deck with Sword of Feast and Famine, Sword of Fire and Ice, and Batterskull. But then going a little bit more card quality, instead of all the fanciness, rounds it out with Dark Confidant, Monastery Mentor, Liliana the Veil, Gideon Ally of Zendikar. Like, that's just a lot of really good cards, right?
Ish. I mean, like,
no.
I mean, so
you're off Dark Confidant, aren't you?
We're just talking about a different format, right? Like, these are 3s and 4s and 5s that we're talking about in a format where people do some craziness. I look at this and I'm like, oh wow, Monastery Mentor, that's a powerful card. Stoneforge Mystic, that's a really powerful card. This has got to be one of the worst Monastery Mentor decks, though, right? Like, it's a really individually strong card. This deck has 14 creatures, right? Like, sometimes it just won't do anything, right? Or it like just won't snowball for you, right? The decks that are really, really great Monastery Mentor decks, they can turn like one cantrip into a lot of material. Right? This deck never does that. It doesn't have like its closest thing to a repeated action is Cling to Dust. And
that's an expensive way to do it.
Yeah, it's just not like, I'm not decrying Monastery Mentor. It's one of the most powerful creatures in terms of individual ability to take over a game that I can think of. But it's just not doing that in this deck. Right? Dude, it's fine in this deck.
Don't you want to just like unearth the Monastery Mentor back though?
So I have a Grey Ogre? I mean, like,
a Grey Ogre, you got all the rest of your mana. You spent 1 mana.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Gideon Ally of Zendikar is like not even that powerful in this format. It's 4 mana. Like, you could just lose the game, 4 mana-ing. I think Liliana the Veil is like pretty not that great here. Like, if I'm imagining a black-white creature deck, why am I not making spirits that I could play out of the graveyard with this? Right? I'm not on this deck. Like, I've lost to a lot of black-white decks in Modern in my day. And it's weird for me to say this because Stoneforge Mystic is so powerful, but I'm very medium on this deck.
Okay.
Sub-medium, I'd say.
What do you think of Wasteland Strangler?
It's...
So the way you're powering it up is with Cling to Dust and...
Path to Exile.
I guess you can, Kaya's Guile, somebody. I don't know. Wasteland Strangler seems oddly less reliable and high quality compared to this deck isn't even using all these cards maximally efficient, but its card quality is quite high, right? Like in the abstract. Wasteland Strangler is fine, but isn't that this seems? I guess Tidehauler Sculler. That's the move.
So I think that the card quality is, I mean, from like a classic valuations, rate standpoint, I don't even think it's that high. Like, I think
Really?
Gideon Ally of Zendikar is, you have to rate it against the available cards. Like,
Definitely.
Like it's not that high. Like Liliana the Veil obviously is a singular card. Wasteland Strangler is pretty freaking medium to me. We're talking
Definitely. No question.
3 mana, like for a 3/2 body, needs setup and doesn't even kill everything that's relevant. Like, so I don't know. I think this deck can certainly, go undefeated, win a tournament, etc. I'm not super excited to sleeve. Like, if I could totally be convinced to play a black-white deck. I don't think it would be this one.
Well, I mean, I guess I can't blame you. At the end of the day, you gotta. Actually, though, knowing you, at the end of the day, aren't you just going to have to play a red deck?
I mean, have to. Strong.
You?
I have a strong preference to play decks with Monastery Swiftspear in Modern. Yes, I really like a Monastery Swiftspear. So
there's kind of a relatively straightforward version, but with some cards that have shown up some. But anyway, it's Ken Sports Fan packing a mono red deck. It's got a lot of the usual suspects like Lava Spike and Lightning Bolt and Wild Slash, but I guess Wild Slash is not the most common. But the twist here is 4 Mishra's Bauble, 4 Lava Dart, 4 Manamorphose, 4 Bedlam Reveler, 4 Crash Through.
Yeah, I think this is not my preferred strategy.
You just want the bolts.
Well, so a couple of things. One, I actually think this deck is light on Sunbaked Canyons. There's 4 total, Sunbaked Canyon and Fire Islet. I played a deck at the end of last year. I played the full 8, never regretted it. So it's always super weird to me when people are playing a mono red deck. I played 19 lands, so 1 more land than this deck. The full 8, and they're like, well, what about Lava Dart? I played 4 Lava Dart. Funny enough, the Fiery Islet, the Sunbaked Canyon draw you into plenty of mountains. So, I would.
You just didn't really have a lot of spots where you top decked, one of the like a Sunbaked Canyon, and you go, man, I sure wish this was another mountain.
No, did not happen very often, right? So, I mean, Bedlam Reveler is a really powerful card, but in order to enable the Bedlam Reveler, you've got I don't know, man. Wild Slash is not that good. Crash Through is pretty bad. It's pretty bad. 1 mana cantrip, relatively low text here. The Soul, I mean, you need the Soulscar Mage and the Monastery Swiftspear to really be gearing up for Crash Through to be a valuable card to play in a mono-red modern deck. I think you just get way more out of it if you just play a bunch of cards that do 3 for 1 mana.
So do you like something a little closer to Ghost's 5/0 list? I mean, obviously, you'd probably play 4 Rift Bolts. But
I actually hate this deck. I'd much rather play the other deck, yeah.
You just don't like Wild Nikotl.
Yeah, I think, if you're going to play a deck like this, one of the main advantages you have is that the removal is not good, right? So you can have... The removal isn't off, right? It's not turned off, but it's not good, right? Spending 2+ mana on a Monastery Swiftspear usually means you already took damage from it, right? It's generally true of an Eidolon of the Great Revel, stuff like that. Man, once you're scraping for Wild Nikotl, you're just playing a guy and they're just getting their eliminate turn.
Okay. How about Sick World's list then? Sick World playing just Boros with Searing Blaze, Skullcrack, Lightning Helix, Lightning Bolt, Boros Charm, Skewer the Critics, Rift Bolt, Lava Spike, but still packing Eidolons, Guides, and Swiftspears.
This is way closer to something I'd want to play.
Only 5 of the Sunbaked Canyon lands.
It's different when you're playing 2 colors, right? For sure, that's different. I mean, this is very, very respectably classic list, although I've been off the Skullcrack for a long time. I would just make a macro suggestion to anybody playing Skullcrack in Modern. Take however many Skullcracks you have in your deck. It's usually not that many. You probably start with 1, and then you have the other ones in sideboard. Replace every Skullcrack with a Bone Crusher Giant, and then call me in the morning.
Okay,
Never look back.
That's really cool. That could be that's a really cool way to do it. That does actually sound pretty good.
Yeah, so here's how it works. You want Skullcrack because it does stuff like turn off Core Firewalker, right? Which is a card that is in Sick World's own sideboard, right? Bone Crusher Giant does the exact same thing. It also makes a 4/3 creature. And the thing is, one of the things that I found that was really, really compelling to me when I started playing Bone Crusher Giant was there's just a lot of games that you don't win in the first 4 turns. Like your opponent had removal, or they made you discard your last burn spell, or they stopped your creature rush. When you realize like around turn 3 and 4 that like 3 of the cards that you drew were all 2-for-1s, and you start destroying them with 4/3s that are punishing to them to remove, you just win a lot of games you weren't going to otherwise win. And God forbid you're playing like a mirror or pseudo mirror. A 4/3 is an animal against one of these decks, right? Like you might be able to take it out with a Searing Blaze or something, but both of us took it on the jaw, right? Like that guy took out your Eidolon or Goblin Guide to begin with, then he did another 2 to you, and like it is a Pyrrhic victory to take it out with a Searing Blaze, which is like your best play against a 4/3. I cannot speak enough of how good Bone Crusher Giant is in modern burn decks. I was playing 1+3 a lot, and I gotta say, the first time you and I talked about Bone Crusher Giant, you're like, "Hey, Michael J, what do you think about Bone Crusher Giant in modern?" And I was like, "Shut up, Patrick. It costs 2 and 3. I play 1 casting cost cards." I was wrong. That card is fantacular in modern burn decks.
Glad to hear it, man. There's a different red deck actually. This is not the type that you would normally play, but Hisakura's 5/0 list is a new evolution of the Through the Breach Primeval Titan Valakut style of deck. The twist here is featuring both Emrakul the Aeon's Torn and Indomitable Creativity. What do you think, man?
We pause for a second, jump back to that one. I do want to talk about one other of the more classic red decks, and then jump to
please,
that deck.
Please. Oh, did you want to?
Palika Soul 5-0'd with a list. This one is meaningfully different, and I do have one comment on it, right? So Palika Soul played 4 Vexing Devil, 4 Monastery Swiftspear, 4 Goblin Guide, only 2 Eidolon. I can get behind it in this list. Bunch of burn cards, including Seal of Fire. All in for Seal of Fire. Big difference, 4 Chandra's Incinerator in the main deck. So you got cards like Skewer the Critics and Rift's Bolt, which are, really easy setup cards for Chandra's Incinerator. God forbid the opponent ever lets you untap with it in this. I think if I were to go in a different direction on red deck, I would go something like, I probably wouldn't play Vexing Devil, but I would probably go...
Dude, good combo with the Incinerator.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's plenty of other stuff that's combo with the Incinerator that's a little more consistent than Vexing Devil. I mean, look, there's worse things in the world than nugging somebody for 4 for 1 mana. I mean, I'm not going to complain on that. But I think this is a... I
never take the 4. I'm always just like, oh my god, I can finally terminate something.
Yeah, it's the same thing as a Wildly Cattle. It just turns on their cards, right? But Chandra's Incinerator is a big game if you're untapping with it. The one thing that I would editorialize about this is Palika Soul played 3 Shard Volleys in the main deck. I hate Shard Volley, right? I despise Shard Volley, and I love Lava Dart, right? And I will just say this. For the same resources, right? Shard Volley and Lava Dart cost 1 red mana and the sacrifice of a land. Shard Volley does 3, Lava Dart does 2. So Shard Volley does do more, but you have so much flexibility on the Lava Dart that you don't get on the Shard Volley. And when you're playing with prowess creatures like Monastery Swiftspear, so Palika Soul only played Monastery Swiftspear.
You make it up.
Yeah, and just the fact that you could just like take out 2 elves with it or something like that, it comes up a lot. I can't speak enough of how good Lava Dart is, especially if you're playing Skewer the Critics. You can get the Lava Dart into the graveyard and then set up the Skewer the Critics for no mana. And that's a very subtle just interaction to get Chandra's Incinerator into play. And you only gave up 1 point of... You only give up 1 point of damage, and the Shard Volley, like, it's inconvenient. You know, it's just really inconvenient to cast a lot of the time.
Well, and I got to tell you, as a guy who's played a lot of Grixis against Lava Dart, it can be kind of inconvenient to play against. It is a humbling experience the first time you cryptic command somebody's Lava Dart.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to that, you know, I mean, it does, you know, at a certain point, you're like, well, this is embarrassing.
Look, man, I really don't want to tempt the fates when I say this, because I believe me, you know in your bones the respect I have for people who play like 3 timely reinforcements in their main deck, right? Like, you know I hate those. Like, I don't hate the people, right? I love the gamer, but I mean, I don't like sitting against, you know, 2-3 timely reinforcements main deck.
That's your worst nightmare.
Yeah, but my lifetime win rate Lava Dart against timely reinforcements is very high.
Oh, no.
And I mean, I'm tempting the fates when I say this. I know it. And you wouldn't think that, right? Like, if you line these 2 cards up against each other,
they're okay.
One is trash, one is treasure. But I mean, everything from getting my prowess guy past multiple tokens to just triggering them on the wrong spot because I didn't cost any mana. You know, every single thing that you can think of, it's helped me out in those situations when, like, you cryptic command a Shard Volley, it's horrible for me. You cryptic command a Lava Dart, it's like I won the lottery, right?
Yeah.
All right, so you had a different style of deck you wanted to talk about. I just really wanted to mention this. I do think Chandra's Incinerator is going to be a long-term kind of...
Even though it's something that can get killed?
I'm not saying real enthusiastic about playing it in my main deck. It's totally something I would consider playing, and I think that it's probably awesome for either mirrors or other matchups where people don't have big stuff, right? Like, if somebody's just, like, small to medium power cards, like a 6/6 is just might be out of the range of their removal. I'm not super gung-ho about casting it against you. You have, like, Terminates and Cryptic Commands and stuff like that, but I would be super gung-ho about casting it against myself. Right? Like, what am I going to do about that? It's 6/6, and it'll kill you if you untap with it. Like, it's very powerful, and it's easy to set up. That's the other thing. So easy to set up.
Yeah. All right, so this new style of Breach Titan has 3 Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn, which you can find with your 4 Indomitable Creativity or 3 Transmogrify, which you're powering up with 3 copies of Dwarven Mine, and obviously a million ways to go fetch it, given that it's a mountain, but also a Field of the Dead, and in theory, you can also hit Koth, but I don't think it's going to come to that all that often, since there's just so many ways to find Dwarven Mine.
I think this deck's cool.
Really cool. This is a couple really good plans, right? And they kind of work together, right? Like, but you could do a lot worse than having access to so many turn 3 Emrakul or Primeval Titans, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, turn 3 Primeval Titan is already a sick plan, right? And then there's a ton of people they could just lose to your Koth, right? You just let's say you just cast Koth on turn 3, you know, make a 4/4 and get in there. It's got 4 loyalty and 4/4 creature, just bash them.
Is this weird? Why do you really want these 2 Koths instead of another Transmogrify and another Emrakul?
I think that Koth gives you a meaningfully different game plan. Right?
Sure, so, that makes sense.
So, like, just imagine this. If you're playing against somebody and your, like, game plan is Dwarven Mine, Transmogrify, you're pretty bad against any point removal, right? Like, I think that's a big problem for you. Like, just somebody with a Pinger in play or Lightning Bolt in their hand or something, you just totally miss. Like, Koth can get them in that situation where other cards can't necessarily get them. I do think that there's some inconsistency, right? Like, I think there's a lot of spots where you really just want an Emrakul and you end up with a Primeval Titan. Oh, boo-hoo, I got a Primeval Titan, I know.
Well, that's why the creativity's better. Go get both.
Oh, I mean, this deck is very high-end powerful. When I was talking about you could just be playing a great day of Modern and then you just end up with the wrong matchup in top 8, like, I have no clue. You know, you made mention of me playing a red deck. I don't know how a red deck ever beats this deck. Right? They just, like, slow play you. It's just, all their cards are expensive. You don't even get Eidolon damage in against them. They're just like, I took 4. Here's a Primeval Titan. Ho-hum. Beat my Field of the Dead now. Not gonna. I'll tell you right now, not gonna beat it.
So, a little bit different of a alternate creature, Shark Typhoon in StoneBlade. What do you think of Shark? Like StoneBlade, like Shark Blade. Kogama's 5/0 list is just straight blue-white. And instead of a third color, you just have room for all the good stuff like Stoneforge Mystic, Snapcaster Mage, Teferi Time Raveler, and Shark Typhoon, in this case, with plenty of permission. A pretty even mix of Archmage's Charms, Cryptic Command, Force of Negation, Mana Leak, and Spell Snare.
I think this deck's pretty great. The only thing that's weird to me is only 2 Teferi Time Raveler. Like, aren't there some other buddies that you might want to have in this deck on the Planeswalker line? I'm looking at this deck and I'm thinking there's a spot for somebody I know.
Chase the Mind Sculptor?
Yeah. This is a great Chase the Mind Sculptor deck, I think.
Maybe. I mean, you are keeping a lot of your mana open. I do think I would play, I mean, I guess I'm a sucker. I would play one. But, like, this deck is definitely aspiring to be kind of cheap, right? Like, this is not the greediest StoneBlade deck we've seen.
No, this is almost the definition of an ungreedy deck, right? Like, it's got opt. I mean, like, this is just a smooth deck, I think. So, but the argument I make is when you're playing cards like Sword of Feast and Famine, you just have an incentive to be tapping mana on your own turn, and there are some cards that are worth tapping mana for.
Yep.
Also, Teferi's a great lead into Jace.
Oh, for sure. No, dude, this deck, the amount of discipline here, this looks like a deck Kenji would play, if you ask me.
Yeah. I gotta kind of meditate on these Shark Typhoons. I could totally see this deck just land, Shark Typhoon. You know what's missing? Like, shouldn't there be some of the blue land from Throne of Eldraine?
No, it has it. 2 Mystic Sanctuary.
Yeah, like 2 more, I mean. Right? Like,
maybe. This deck's too disciplined, man. It's just not greedy.
Like, I don't know. I could totally imagine myself like playing just 2 Mystic Sanctuary in the sideboard for all the games that I'm siding in Timely Reinforcements. Right? Like if you're this guy, like, why not? You just never lose. Oh, you thought you were coming back. Crack my hallowed fountain, buddy. What do you think about that one?
So, actually, there are...
It's cracked my flooded strand. Speaking of discipline, I think that's too many hallowed fountains. What do you think?
I don't know, man. I don't know. That's the first number that looks right to me. I don't know.
You like 3?
I like 3. Would you play 2?
I was thinking 2.
Yeah, that's because you always think about burn. So there's a couple combo decks, dude. There's a couple combo decks. Obviously, we've seen no shortage of Devoted Druid, various Devoted Druid combo decks. But what do you think of Kinnan Bonder Prodigy? So Storytime's list is a freed from the real Kinnan Bonder Prodigy deck. And you've got access to the Vizier of Remedies Devoted Druid package. But like a lot of what's going on here is finding Freed from the Real and putting it, combining Kinnan Bonder Prodigy with Freed from the Real.
So it's also a Leyline of Abundance, Kinnan Bonder Prodigy, all these guys deck, right?
Oh, for sure. Yep.
So, I mean, what is this? Just hyper redundancy on creature based mana. I think
You've also got tutors that go all over the place. Like you've got the Heliod's Pilgrim, so all your creature tutors can get you Leyline of Abundance or Freed from the Real.
so.
And obviously, Finale Devastation is both a tutor and then it's a win condition when you do one of your combos.
Yeah, I think that Finale Devastation is obviously it's always going to be for enough in this deck, right? Because you've just, I mean, among other things, you've got Devoted Druid, right? You've got Devoted Druid, Vizier of Remedies for nigh infinite mana. I'm not sure what makes this better or worse than any other version with Vizier of Remedies, Devoted Druid, etc. I'm not sure what makes Leyline of Abundance better or worse than Eladamri's Call and Postmortem Lunge, right? So the end game is the same, right?
That's true.
Make a huge amount of mana for Finale of Devastation or Walking Ballista. I think so maybe this deck is faster because it has Leyline of Abundance, but it's also in some sense like more monodirectional. Like some of the versions that have Collected Company, for example, could just beat you with Company, or the versions that have Kitchen Finks, they just have different resistances, right? So this deck, like if you can somehow shut down creature based mana, or creature abilities, this deck doesn't really have a very good plan B. I think maybe I guess even Nylea that's a creature ability, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it must be speed on Leyline of Abundance.
That's the hope.
Yeah, maybe. I don't even know, Patrick. It seems to me like a lot of these decks do a similar thing, and that this version with Freed from the Real, and I guess if you're in for Kin and Ponder Prodigy, you're in for blue, right? It's complicating matters.
Yeah, I see.
I'll tell you what, though.
You're aspiring to be faster, but your mana is going to be a little more inconsistent.
But very quietly, Sylvan Caryatid is a card is a beatdown. It has hexproof,
dude, because it blocks Goblin Guide.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a Goblin deck. No Goblin Guides in this one, though. Jimmy Setzer's list, we normally think of Modern as being a more powerful format than Historic, given the much larger card pool. However, in Modern, you don't have access to Muxus. So this list is actually trying to set up so it's got Conspicuous Snoop is the big thing here. But you're using Bogart Harbinger to put Kiki Jiki on top of your deck, which means the Snoop has Kiki Jiki's ability. And you can go off and use your Sling Gang Lieutenant or Pashalik Mons to do an arbitrary amount of damage to your opponent.
So I do think that even though you don't have Muxus, this deck actually has a pretty high power level ceiling because unlike Historic, you have Chalice of the Void. So I think that probably goes a long way in combination with Aether Vial in spoiling other people's fun. So this deck's got a lot of weird casting costs, good number of 3s, got a 5 that matters. So I think that level of disruption is pretty meaningful here. And then even if you've got a bunch of 1s, if you got your Aether Vial down first, you can kind of play around it. So a little bit less offensive power level without Muxus, but substantial incremental resistance to other people's strategy.
Well, plus with 4 Bogart Harbinger and 4 Goblin Matron, you have like an incredible amount of ability to find these numerous powerful targets. And in fact, interestingly, we see 2 copies of most of the targets, like in case you have to burn one because of just how valuable it is later on to have access to it.
Yeah. I also think that it matters here because there's so many cards. Like, Sling Gang Lieutenant costs 4. A lot of these cards cost 3. Because you have not just Chalice of the Void, but Blood Moon in the sideboard, as well as Inquisition of Kozilek and Thoughtseize, which can slow down combo decks, that you just gain time to develop your strategy. And you kind of gain mana via Skirk Prospector and Aether Vial. So I think it just kind of all comes together in a way that many other decks don't have a chance to do. It's like if you think about other decks who play like a lot of Thoughtseize or disruptive elements, they're usually trying to kind of jam a very, very specific strategy down the opponent's throat. But I think this deck it's set up to marinate a little bit, don't you think?
Oh yeah, I mean this one just, its position is just inevitable. This is almost a Tron deck with regards to just how much every turn that goes by, this deck's resources just accumulate. Yeah. So the question I have is, does this deck have what it takes to beat the fast combo decks in this format?
I think so. If you have a combination, so people aren't necessarily killing you on turn 1 in Modern.
No, they're right. Very rarely doing anything like that.
So if you've got like an Aether Vial, you're opening this Aether Vial, you've already got kind of a roadmap to doing what you would need to do with mana development, and then now you have your mana left to do other stuff. That can be Chalice of the Void, right? To disrupt a number of cards in the opponent's deck, and especially in a tournament where you would see your opponent's deck list, or if you could, you're playing in game 2 and the kinds of cards they're playing, you have a lot of space for planning. And then again, this deck's got 3 Thoughtseize, 2 Inquisition of Kozilek after sideboarding, as well as 3 Blood Moon. So you have a lot of disruptive elements. And I think, it obviously depends on which combo deck you're talking about. Like a Valakut combo deck is differently vulnerable to things than, a Storm combo deck is. But you have a variety of tools, and I think you just have the runway to kind of put together both an offense and the disruption. And I think that's because you have cards like Goblin Matron and Goblin Ringleader, which you could potentially be spending 0 mana for, right? So you just have Goblin Matron in your deck, right? You just have Goblin Ringleader in your deck. You're relying on Aether Vial to cast those cards. You're using your actual mana to cast cards like Thoughtseize and Blood Moon, and then you're like, all right, I'm going to Matron for Ringleader or whatever, or Ringleader into my combo pieces. Then all of a sudden you went from, kind of an annoying disruptive board position to dominating your opponent strategically.
Yeah. The ability to turn on a dime too is, I don't know. That almost seems like part of what you're signing up for in Modern is that there are 2 types of decks. Ones that are just like guns blazing from the get-go, and ones that can suddenly be guns blazing.
Yeah. I mean, like, if you think about Death Shadow, right? Like, that's a deck that you're just like, oh, wow, their cards are pretty bad. Oh, shoot, I'm dead. Right? Like,
well, Death Shadow goes from 0 to hero real quick.
I mean, you have not lost a game of Modern until you lose one of the ones where the opponent bolts themselves. Right? Like, bolt myself. Huh? You're dead. Yeah.
So what do you think of the Modern take on Niv Mizzet Reborn? In the league, Wusa put up a 5-0 finish with a Niv Mizzet Reborn list. And these decks, I mean, these are always fun. But in Modern, you have access to so many absolutely unbelievable cards that you end up with a pretty intense spread, right? Like when you're thinking like, okay, Azorius, yeah, I'd say Teferi Time Raveler is a pretty good card, right? What about, I don't know, Gruul? Yeah, Ren and 6. I could see Ren and 6 being pretty good. Simic? Uro? Is that reasonable card quality? And obviously there's Bring to Light anyway. What about, I don't know, Orzhov? Is Kaya's Guile? Or Boros, Lightning Helix? Like, this deck gets to play just like so many absolutely unbelievable Assassin's Trophy from Golgari. It's like you just get the greatest hits from each guild.
Yeah, when I see a deck like this, I mean, they're just showing off, right? Right? Like, 4 Lightning Helix. Lightning Helix is almost the only 4 of in this deck, right? 4 Ren and 6, 4 Lightning Helix. The only other 4 ofs are Accelerator cards. So,
dude, Kaya's Guile.
Oh, you're right, Kaya's Guile. That is a weird 4 of to me.
No, Kaya's Guile's amazing. Dude, Kaya's Guile's so good. Graveyard Hate, removal that's not even targeted, getting the body, but mainly just gain 4 life against people like you.
Yeah, I hate those people. I'm trying to get them off of Kaya's Guile. Why don't we agree that Kaya's Guile's kind of weird? This deck's already got 4 Lightning Helix. He's a terrible person.
Dude, and 3 Uros. There's so much life gain here.
I mean, just even Kaya Orzhov Usurper is not a friendly opponent.
Well, and you got to remember, part of how you have room for all this is that this is a Yorion deck. And Yorion plus Niv Mizzet Reborn, that is going big.
Yeah. I mean, that's an understatement. I mean,
it is kind of sweet blinking all your Utopia Sprawls, or rather your Abundant Growth, I mean.
Is it weird to not play any main deck Yorions?
Is it weird?
Yeah.
No.
Yorion's a pretty good get, right?
I wouldn't play Yorion. No way. Dude, I would play the 4th Niv Mizzet before I play a Yorion.
You never want to flip over a Yorion and be like, I'm keeping that one?
Dude, I think this deck's got good enough Niv Mizzet hits. Besides, it's not. I mean, you've already got Supreme Verdict and Teferi Time Raveler. It's not like you're passing on the Azorius Guild.
So, and it's also got this sub theme of Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker Restoration Angel, which is kind of weird in my opinion because neither of those cards can be tutored up by Niv Mizzet Reborn.
No, they can be tutored up by Bring to Light though.
Just like drew one, get the other one.
Yeah.
I like the fact that there is this weird sub-theme in the deck. That's
for when you got to switch it on them.
Yeah, I buy it. When you're playing like a 300-card deck or whatever this is, you got room. Just play an infinite combo. I'm in for it.
Do you really have room for a Kaya, though? Actual Kaya?
That Kaya is a backbreaker. Let me read you these abilities.
Oh, because it gains... Oh, my God.
+1, gain 2 life and do some other stuff. -1, kill your Monastery Swiftspear permanently. -5, never comes up. But those abilities are very strong.
Yeah. I mean, every time I play against Kaya, it ends up losing the head-to-head against...
Yeah, but you play powerful cards. If you're somebody who's just playing, like, a lot of focused cards that are not very powerful individually, like... Here's the thing I always say about Burn. You look at the Burn side of the table and the games that they lose, it's like pretty embarrassing. You're like, all right, I drew a bunch of like, deal 3 to the face only type cards, and they have like 2 Tarmogoyfs and like 5 cards in hand. Right? Like that, you're like, all right, the games you lose, you're like, I have 2 land in play, no cards, and they're on 17. Right? The games you win, you look like a genius. You're like, Swift Spear... Like, this comes off a spectacle oh, your cards are so expensive. You're dead, right? All the other games, you're just like, why did I show up to this tournament? Like, they're literally on 17 and have a grip full of cards, and, I've got a bunch of stuff I can't cast or don't want to cast. Like, you've all these cards that cost 3, right? You didn't have the correct setup sequence for them.
It's a tough life. So you got to just kind of, just believe in the heart of the cards, draw them in the right order.
I agree. Here's the problem with Burn. All the people who have the powerful cards that are of different quality, you like strategically mulligan, right? You're like, all right, I'm going to mulligan so that my hand is good. I have like a 30 land deck, and some of my stuff accelerates me, and some of my stuff has a really high amount of leverage in certain matchups. The burn deck,
None of your cards
are the same power level, but need to be cast using specific sequencing. that's you mulligan. That's like they just gained 3 life every single time you mulligan. That's bad for a deck that can only deal like 24 total damage.
Yeah, if things go well. There's 2 other strategies I wanted to touch on quickly. One was, it's not even just a strategy because it was used in a couple places, but there's been a recent trend of the use of Elder Gargaroth in Modern in decks. Like, for instance, Chihoa Jante's 5-0 list is a El Adamri's Call Aether Vial deck, but like, I guess it's a ramp Field of the Dead deck, but like it goes all over the place. This has got Primeval Titan, Golos, but then it's got one Elder Gargaroth as a tutor target. And it's a real high statement to be packing an Elder Gargaroth when you're only playing 2 Golos and 2 Primeval Titan.
Wow. Well, here's the thing about this deck. 27 lands. It's got multiple different types of payoffs. It's got kind of the Valakut payoff. Then it's also got like Castle Ardenvale, though, right? So it can like Ghost Quarter, Flagstone, and Trocaire itself, and like you said before, it's got Field of the Dead. So these 27 land are doing work, right? They could be doing very different work in different games, as far as I can tell. But that whole white angle with like Castle Ardenvale and a basic Plains and a Selesnya Sanctuary are giving you Eladamri's Call, and the only non-creature spell other than Eladamri's Call ×2 is Aether Vial, right? So, you just have 5 ticks at some point. You're like, call for Gargaroth. It's going to be 6 ticks for Primeval Titan next turn. End. That's just how it goes.
Similarly, Kogamo over in the league, packing a Summoner's Pact way to go find 1 copy of Elder Gargaroth. This is I guess it's a Teamer Field of the Dead deck, but it's basically a red-green Valakut deck, but with Uro. Just splashing Uro. And you've got the whole Ren and 6 action going on, but there's 1 Elder Gargaroth and 1 Hydroid Crassus for exotic targets.
I actually really like the direction that Kogamo went with this deck. It's kind of reminiscent of the decks that used to play, a certain Thief of Crowns, those kind of rampy decks. So this deck, it's not the fastest Primeval Titan deck, right? It's got Sakura Tribe Elder and Explore kind of end, right? Like, it doesn't have like the whole, I'm getting my thing out really, really quick. It does have
Royal Grazer.
Yeah, it's true. You're right. It's you know what? I take it back. Arboreal Grazer is an outstanding accelerator in a 28 land deck, but it's still not the most explosive.
This is not the most explosive,
right,
by any stretch of the imagination.
So, I actually think that it has a liability against more explosive Primeval Titan decks because it's not a particularly good interactive deck, right? So somebody who's like a more explosive sort of, I'm getting this out with haste, or I've got whatever permanents I'm going to stack together and they're going to tap and untap each other really quick. Those guys are going to be dominatingly powerful against a deck that's more plotting like this. But what Kogamo gets in return is, Kogamo has like a pretty good Primeval Titan deck, right? He's out on turn 4. All good. You're not dead yet.
And you can do some pretty sweet stuff with Ren and 6 plus Dryad of Ilsean Grove, right?
Yeah, but
obviously Dryad's good with Valakut anyway, but like Ren and 6 plus Dryad is like a nice combo.
But what this set gets is like a pretty good progressive game, right? So if somebody just has a Path to Exile for your Primeval Titan, this has a whole other game plan. Like, that's, I think, a big part of it. And I think that you were right also on the Arboreal Grazer. Grazer Uro, call a spade, along with 4 copies of Sakura Tribe Elder, is pretty good resistance against the good guys.
Yeah, this deck is definitely, okay at blocking.
Yeah, I mean, and it's all those cards put together that say draw a card and put extra land into play, etc. They're just gonna put Kogamo into a position where they have time to develop a game plan, and it doesn't have to be a hit you over the head, kill you in one turn game plan. Just drawing like 2 or 3 extra cards a turn, which this deck can do multiple different ways, is just eventually going to get you there when your guys are all 6/6s. Right? Assuming you're in a matchup where that matters. And, you know, again, it's going to be dominated by the super fast Primeval Titan or combo decks. And I think that that's just a reasonable trade-off. One thing I would say, though, is if you're going to be in that situation where you're dominated by those other kind of decks, I would probably spend more than 0 sideboard cards on blue interactive cards.
Dude, Ashiok.
2 Ashioks.
That's more than 0.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking like some kind of disdainful stroke, some kind of, you know, stop somebody from getting you. I mean, I guess Ashiok is very good at stopping some people, but if I wanted to go that direction, I'd at least play, I don't know, did you just mulligan to Ashiok? What if you don't have him?
Don't worry about it. Just keep going.
Yeah?
Just try to get a Primeval Titan out.
I mean, this deck is just terrible in terms of its attitude, though. I guess 2 Uros and 4 Arboreal Grazers and 4 Sakura Tribe Elders was not enough, because it also has 2 Weather the Storm in the sideboard. My goodness. Dude. Days will be... And an Obstinate Baloth. Wow.
Yeah, well, you remember and the Elder Gargaroth and the Hydra Crassus?
No, those guys are... I mean, that's at least...
a life game. You know, This is the kind of Valakut deck I think Kenji would play.
You just keep saying Kenji will play these decks that are good.
Sure.
I love Tireless Tracker in this deck. I love like any deck that's just like, I have a really powerful main deck plan, but I'm just going to side in like 3 Tireless Trackers for those games where I want to give my opponent a chance.
I don't know, man. It's got its spots.
It's powerful, but it's like... As someone who has sided in Tireless Tracker in decks that had really powerful sort of Titan-making stuff in game 1, I can tell you, I lost way more games with Tireless Tracker in play than I lost with, like, my Aetherworks Marvel in play.
I don't know, man. First of all, I don't know what you're doing with Aetherworks Marvel and Tireless Tracker, but second of all, I don't know, man. I've faced Tireless Tracker a lot. There's a real guessing game. You put the other person in a spot where they can't afford to... Like, if they try to just take out their cheap removal, you end up getting them with Tireless Tracker. The reason I don't like it as much in this deck is that I think that once you're already a Dryad of Ilsean Grove deck and an Uro deck, then you don't really get the same value you would from blanking people's, from people getting punished for sideboarding out their cheap removal.
Well, like, Dryad of Ilsean Grove has 4 toughness, and Sakura Tribe Elder is, a terrible target for things in general. I think depending on who your opponent is, they might take a cheap removal out anyway.
Okay, because what? It's Lightning Bolts. It's only red cards.
No, but the Fatal Pushes and stuff like that are also like pretty mediocre against this deck. What are you going to Fatal Push an Arboreal Grazer?
No, that's true. That's pretty medium. What do you think of Elder Gargaroth in the red-green monsters deck? Like these decks that. They're usually like a bunch of accelerators, some blood moons, some land destruction, and some monsters. Captain Fabrosa has a version that it's without blood moon. Like, yeah, there's Magus of the Moon, but this deck is like real light on the land destruction package. It's got 4 Magus of the Moon, 3 Pillage, and it really is actually a red-green monsters deck, just bashing with Bone Crusher Giant, Bloodbraid Elf, 3X Elder Gargaroth, 3 Clothis, God of Destiny, 4 Seasoned Pyromancer, a couple of Scavenging Ooze. Like, this deck's just monsters.
So I think you just have to be a big believer in Arbor Elf Utopia Sprawl if you're going to play this deck, right? Like, it's not super high on power level. You even talk about cards like Elder Gargaroth, and Elder Gargaroth is the most powerful card in this deck, and that card is like
are you like not mana efficiency wise, but just highest impact?
Yeah, like that card's like, all right, it costs 5. I mean, you're gonna get a return for 5 mana. Like a lot of the rest of the stuff is very fair, right? Like Bloodbraid Elf is a great card. Obviously, you're getting a return on that too, but it costs 4. I think like it. I think
That's not powerful enough for you.
it's very weird to me. 3 pillage and kind of end. You know, like why even play the pillages then? You didn't even play 4. It's also like I don't know. I can't imagine myself playing a 20 land deck with like multiple classes of 5-drop. Like that's
Clear you don't play Utopia Sprawl. That's just how Utopia Sprawl people do it.
I mean, God bless them. Like I don't know. Like I can't get the right number of lands in the 20 land decks when I'm playing like mostly 1-drops a lot of the time. It's just a lot of stuff can go wrong when you're relying on lacing, a bunch of very specific low casting cost permanents and 20 land together, and you've got to get 5-drops in play.
You got to just mulligan, man. The last deck I wanted to touch on, we saw a more primitive version a little while back, but it's been continuing to evolve. The Elemental Tribe. The Cody Hope was packing an Elemental Tribe deck. The Elemental package at this point kind of just goes all over the place. So it's another one of those decks that has the 4 Unclaimed Territory, 4 Cavernous Souls, 4 Ancient Ziggurat, 4 Primal Beyond, 4 Aether Vial. And Primal Beyond, being an elemental land, makes it so that this deck's land is basically just rainbow, right? And it has no spells. It's just Aether Vial and elementals. The Smoke Braiders also help, which you can find with Flamekin Harbinger. Part of what's going
so
on,
powerful.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of people don't always realize Voice of Resurgence, very strong elemental. Risen Reef is absolutely incredible in this deck, not surprisingly. 4 Lightning Skelemental.
That's weird.
Wow, I think
me.
I think it's fantastic.
Oh no,
Lightning Skelemental.
I have played a Lightning Skelemental, as you know. I think it's just weird in this deck.
Why?
Because this deck, I feel like this deck wants to get somewhere. Like, Lightning Skelemental isn't a card about for people who want to get somewhere. Lightning Skelemental is a card for people who want to cut off the other person from getting somewhere.
Oh, I don't know, man. I don't know. So first of all, this is an Incandescent Soulstoke deck. So you can Incandescent Soulstoke. First of all, you can just put the Lightning Skelemental from your hand into play. It's going to die anyway, right? But second of all, Incandescent Soulstoke pumps your elementals, as does Omnath. So you can take your Thunderkin Awakener, and you can get its toughness up enough so that you can start recurring stuff like Fulminator Mage. But the real attractive thing is that you can recur Lightning Skelemental straight up. Like, every time you attack with Thunderkin Awakener, you just get Lightning Skelemental back.
All right, I buy it.
That's like pretty unreal, right?
What tutoring do we have here, Flamekin?
You have 4 Flamekin Harbingers. We're a little light. It'd be nice to be able to go get, the 1-off Spite Bellows, 1-off Shriek Maul, 1-off Omnath, 1-off Moldrifter, 1-off Fulminator Mage. Lots of amazing targets. It's tough only having the 4 Flamekin Harbingers, but you try to make up for it with your 4 Risen Reefs. Because Risen Reef does some pretty big stuff in this deck.
Oh, it's really powerful here. I kind of want to play, like, more Moldrifters. Like, at least in sideboard. Isn't this a deck where you just want to grind out Moldrifter?
Moldrifter would be fantastic strategically. The issue, I think, is, remember, this is a deck that has the thinnest of interaction, right? Like, you're already doing so much grinding already. You've got 1 Fulminator Mage. I guess you attack people's hand with Lightning Skelemental. I guess you have a Shriekmaw and a Spite Bellows.
I'd also want to go like
Unsettled.
Like maximum Shriek Maws. Like I think there's matchups where you just want to Shriek Maw people a bunch.
Yeah, but there's a lot of matchups where you don't want to Shriek Maw people at all.
Yeah, so there's only one Shriek Maw in the main. I mean, I think I would just invest a bunch of sideboard space for Shriek Maws.
Actually, speaking of the sideboard, there's two real big things I love here. First, Chalice of the Void. When you're playing Flamekin Harbinger and Aether Vial, and they're so important strategically, it's understandable why you would not necessarily be Chalice of the Void in main deck. But I love seeing the access to it, not only for a Chalice on 1, but a Chalice on 0 or 2, both being in the range. The other card I love is Kahira the Orphan Guard.
Yeah, that's the secret sauce.
Oh, yeah. Isn't Kahira just like so sick with Thunderkin Awakener?
I mean, it's just so sick with this. It's just free.
Well, you got to pay free, and then you vial it down.
I mean, oh my god, the fact that you can vial it down is so disgusting, right? It's actually just so perfect in this deck, also.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. What else can we say about the Orphan Guard? It's so very, very good here.
So, do you think this deck has enough going for it? Because it's not the fastest deck, and so to have so little interaction without being so fast, but it sure is durable. Like if you're fighting somebody trying to fight fair,
I would say this deck can be optimized to be extremely dominant in Modern. Like it has to be optimized in that way, right? I don't think that it's fundamentally like, and I don't think like the Cody Hopes version this is like a very take on all comers version, but I think that the points you made before, like here's a deck that is all over the place in terms of colors, but the mana is outstanding. Like it can effortlessly cast Flamekin Harbinger and Unsettled Mariner, right? Easily cast its Omnaths. So
I mean, its lands are basically almost all Utopias.
Yeah. So it is very, very advantageous from that standpoint. Like, you know, the fundamental kind of bumpers in Magic the Gathering is make things hard to cast. That limits, you know, how out there people can get. This deck breaks that convention kind of at its core. I think you want to be playing a lot against decks like the Rock, right?
Anything fair.
I'm sorry, say again?
Anything fair.
Yeah. Like, but that, like, if you know where your opponents are going to be coming from, you can build your side. Like, first of all, your main deck is full of value, right? If people spend cards trying to deal with a Lightning Skelemental, they could easily lose, just straight up lose to Thunderkin Awakener, right? And, you know, vice versa. So, it also doesn't take a whole lot for, you know, buffed Lightning Skelementals to kill somebody straight up. These cards do force you to discard your hand, not just take a ton of damage, right? Like, this is the best ball lightning in the world if you can get it. But I think, like, if you have a really keen understanding of what the metagame is going to be like in the tournament you're playing, this deck can literally be optimized to be utterly dominating for a variety of different potential metagames. But at the same time, like, I don't see how this deck can survive in other certain metagames, right? Like, if people are all Primeval Titan decks, for example, like, those decks don't bite its Chalice of the Void and they just outcard you. And then they top end you, and your little 6/1 discard spell isn't even looking good anymore. That's kind of the tension here. It's really great in some matchups. Really doesn't have a lot of text in other ones, and so it has to just win on its plan A. And I think its plan A it's not my top 3 plan A's in Modern.
Do you like this more or Humans? As far as, you know, All My Land or Utopia decks go?
I think I like Humans better because Humans has Meddling Mage, Reflector Mage, cards
Thalia.
That, you know, can turn off, you know, strategy X, right? Like, all right, I'm going to turn off your ability to access a huge chunk of your strategy for 2 mana, and this card is pretty not durable, but I'm going to kill you before you can get there. Like, this deck doesn't have that capability. And when the cards are considered in isolation, not just the tonnage of the card. Like, so humans, almost every card builds on every other card, right? Because that's just how the deck is. This deck has a lot of creature type in common, and that allows it to do tutoring from Flame and Harbinger, and allows it to get value from certain of its 2-drops. But the cards don't really build on each other in the same way that they do in humans. Like, I feel like...
I mean, if you have, like, Risen Reef, they do.
Yeah, you're right. Risen Reef is a great example.
But you're not nowhere near humans. I mean, this deck's got some of that action, Omnath and Risen Reef, but like humans has got twice as many cards.
I mean, I think if this deck was straight up against humans across the table, it would probably mug humans.
I think so. I think this deck would take humans' lunch money.
Like, it's just not close. The guys are bigger and the payoffs are bigger. But if you're taking like one of the 2 decks against the room, I mean, I pick the deck that can meddling mage away somebody's strategy and still win pretty fast.
I still like elementals, man. I just don't. I don't know. I like the humans in lower powered formats, but I just don't think that they've got enough power in modern right now. You have to be like really in for the right hate bearers. This deck, I think, you can try to beat, like you said before, you can like beat a couple people you target. You cannot try to target everybody, but like you can have your main deck be such that you can like be pretty good against fair decks and just take a bunch of L's if you happen to face the wrong unfair deck. But I think that might be a better approach than the humans try to do it all, And I worry they might not have enough power to do that.
I think there's one other reason why I'm not a big fan of this deck against the field. Depending on how wide the field is, it eats a lot of splash damage that people are prepared for red decks. They play cards like Firewalker.
Oh my god, dude.
This deck's got a bunch of small red creatures.
Dude, you're just going to go over the top anyway with Shriekmaw. I don't know. You're like
Shriekmaw.
Dude, if somebody just plays Core Firewalker against your Lightning Skelemental.
I mean, they take a lot less damage than they might have otherwise, right? And you're giving them time. I think that it's a non-zero impact.
Okay.
Like, it's like you really rely on your Omnath to attack somebody, right? It's still a red creature.
Maybe. I guess. I don't know. I think you can just kind of go over the top of people if you just have Omnath in play.
I mean, I guess Omnath is very, very... He gets real big, or he makes a lot of big, right? That's his thing.
He makes whoever big. Yeah. Get the Risen Reef big if you need. But Risen Reef being small is such an advantage with the Awakener sometimes. The last one, I guess, the last point I guess I wanted to make was, question really. What's your deck of the week?
Mono red.
Stock mono red?
Yeah. I mean, if I had to pick one of the decks we talked about today, I think I'd just go with the Incinerator version of mono red for its novelty. And then I'd just go back to stock mono red. I think mono red's great in this field. Like, with all these people doing all kinds of crazy stuff with crazy lands and stuff that triggers Eidolons, I love it. That's exactly where I want to be playing. I don't want to be playing in a room that's full of Primeval Titans.
I guess I can respect that.
How about you?
I'm playing. I'm going with Kogamo's blue-white StoneBlade deck, Shark Blade. Yeah.
I find that to be a highly respectable choice. Again, I could totally see myself playing that deck, except for I would have 2 more of them lands in the sideboard so that I could really maximize the timely reinforcements, because that's sweet. And I would play 1 less Hollow Fountain, but that's just me.
Awesome. All right, dude. See you next week. Bye.
In life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge, it's a jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a drive the game.